It kind of stems from that because like when I played arcade mode, I'm at home by myself just trying to get through the game, whatever, beat the CPU. It was like I would naturally kind of gravitate to a defensive style because like they would just beat the shit out of you. Like I don't know if they're reading my inputs or what, but it's just like if I tried to go on the offensive, like I'm getting swept. Like every time I'm walking, like I'm just like getting beaten footsies by a level 8 CPU or whatever, and I'm just like, okay, I can't beat this guy this way. Let me turtle and let me hold charge, and I'll let him come at me, and I'll play reactionary. We're the podcast that chronicles the past and present of the fighting game community and bring on various perspectives from Arizona. This is episode 19. My name is Benny, also known as AK Grandmaster B, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John, the son of Toy who walks this earth to crush his enemies, see them driven before him, and hear the lamentations of their women. How you doing today, John?
Pretty good. If I tried to do an Arnie impression on our podcast, it would be such a travesty and possibly sound a little racist. So I'm gonna abstain from that. Oh man, I've been good though. Like we just wrapped up our Halloween night, and it's the first day of November here in the
Yep.
Swanson and Toy household, and we have a ton of leftover candy.
Nice. I was trying to think of something something to introduce you with, and then I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna do Mike, Mike Proud.
Oh yeah,
So that's why I thought of that.
yeah. And Mike, we recently talked to, and he dressed up as Thor for Halloween, if I recall correctly. Mike Prosick, aka Luminaire, guy player extraordinaire, also big buff dude, personal trainer guy.
Yep. So who are we talking today? Who are we talking with today, John?
So we are bringing on an oldie but a goodie, Scott Sabre Bender. What's up, Scott?
What's up, guys? I swear, I think Mike wrote that for you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he didn't take it from any movie whatsoever.
It was the first thing I thought. I was just thinking Mike the whole time he said that.
Yeah, like I said, I was just trying to think of something, and I was just like, you know what? That's the first thing that came to mind because he always calls you son of Toy.
Yep, he does.
He
I
does.
call him son of Prosick. He calls me son of Toy.
Oh.
All
Real
right,
quick
how you
before
guys
we
doing?
get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about I don't want to call it a cross promotion per se, but my fiance recently started up a project for the holiday season this year. She is an avid gift wrapper, a brilliant hobbyist in that respect, to the point where she wraps all of our gifts, and I can take credit for them because they look fantastic. Like she puts like little bells and pine cones and stuff on them and everything. And so throughout the years, we've been like, these are like near professionally done. So have you thought about maybe like just like trying to do this for other folks, and then like letting them sign up online and whatnot? And we're finally kind of getting that off the ground here. And so her wrapping paper, gift wrapping business, so to speak, is at the Google form that I've just put on the video. For those listening on the audio portion of the podcast, check the description for either the video in the YouTube video or the Spotify to get a link to the Google form. Again, we are located in Phoenix, Arizona, and so like shipping and whatnot, like consider all those options. This is mainly for locals, and we're just trying to get our feet wet in this kind of space right now. So shout outs to Super Sultry, aka Jess, my fiance, and best of luck on her endeavors wrapping gifts.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Nice.
Support local.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't take it to Walmart. Take it to Jess
Yeah, there we go.
or wherever you would wrap gifts. I don't know.
The mall tables.
the
you
mall,
walk
yeah.
by.
Yeah.
Is it the Salvation Army? Like you just look there, like, nah.
Yeah. I'm gonna go to Jess.
The last time I even went to a mall for anything, man, like, I don't even. Are malls still a thing?
Here and there.
Malls died once there were no arcades left. In my
Oh.
eyes. I'm just
The
saying,
only
malls
reason to
died.
go to a mall.
Well, I'm just saying, malls died or arcades died, and all of a sudden malls are dying. I mean, there might be a correlation there. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's definitely something I miss for sure. Like that was my thing, just going to the mall. Like
Yeah.
my dad would be like, all right, he'll give us a time, like an hour and a half, and then give us some money. I'm going straight to the arcade.
That's how we made our money stretch. She'd be like, my mom would be like, here's $1. Got to make it stretch for 2 hours while she shops. Got to get good.
To this day, I wonder, like, if I had ever. I'm not even sure if I had gone to the arcades when I was younger, if I would have had the same kind of love for it as a lot of other folks did, because I feel like I like to get into the game and then like really break it down, and arcades by their nature are about limiting your time with the game.
Well, you also got to think too. Back then, you weren't thinking about stuff like that because competitive gaming, other than high score competition, wasn't a thing yet. So you weren't really thinking about breaking things down. You were just playing.
Yeah, you were
That's
just
true.
playing. You're
you're
just
not
kind of
thinking
testing
about
yourself.
Now in today's market, sure, it's a lot different now. So I could see that not working anymore.
Yeah, I feel like the analog for today would be like, or analogy for today rather, would be like, someone posts a Twitter clip of a combo or something, and like if I'm just a casual fighting game player and I want to get into it, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's a cool thing. I want to do that thing. And I feel like before the age of the internet and information sharing and stuff, the arcades were essentially that forum for it, where you would go in and you wouldn't have a clue about what the game was about, but you'd see somebody else doing something cool and being like, I want to do that thing.
Yeah. And then finding the time to be able to land it was not easy.
Yeah, you had to create the situation as well, right?
Yeah, you had to do everything on the fly.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of the arcades too, like in terms of like that feeling of like kind of like first walking up to a game like you've never seen before, was the character selection. It was just like knowing who to select, or who you wanted to pick. Like and then there's like the countdown. So there was like you put your quarter in or whatever, and then it's just like you got 20 seconds maybe, and it's just like, all right, you got to pick somebody. And if you've never played the game before, you're just like like, who do I pick? Who looks cool? Like what is this?
That's actually really interesting. It's like that urgency from the countdown timer combined with you putting your money literally on the line there. You're like, it forces you to like make an instinctual choice.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's interesting.
For sure.
Yeah, I know for sure. Like me, like sometimes I'd watch like, because they'd have those little like it's the same clip kind of like looped over and over, like showing whatever gameplay. So like sometimes like if I'd never seen the game, I'd be like, oh, let me see this little clip first and see what these characters are doing, and I'm like, okay, I'll try that guy.
Yeah, man, it was different for us back then. My character selection, simple. All I had to do, because I played Street Fighter 1. All there was Ryu and Ken. and then but I will say though, when World Warrior first came out, again, I've said this before, it came out of nowhere. No one expected it. It just showed up one day, right? And I remember the crowd being around it. Couldn't see the game because there was such a huge crowd, because they only had one machine at the time because they didn't know it was going to be so huge. And I remember 12 years old, had my tokens ready. I get up to it, hit that start button. I'm like, 8 characters? Like, what is this? But I'm going off my previous experience. I know Ryu Ken. I've seen a Hadouken. I've seen a Dragon Punch. I've seen a Tatsu, right? And what is the icon default to? Ken and Ryu. Ryu on 1 player, Ken on 2 player. I'm like, well, that's a no-brainer, but I'm going to default to Ken because I always like Ken more. So that was like a no-brainer to me, honestly. I just instantly gravitated to them.
Yeah.
So it was as simple as that. It was as simple as that.
Yeah, I was gonna say the thing too, like in World Warrior, that was before you could pick mirror match, before you could pick the same character. So it's just like if somebody picked that character first, you're just like, oh shit, that was my character. Like,
yes, that's a very good point you had to bring up, because you couldn't mirror match. So at least you had Ryu and Ken. They were functionally exactly the same. There was only one difference between them, and it didn't matter. And it was just because Ken had his kick throw. It did the roll before the throw.
Yeah.
So you can actually corner him. You can corner carry him better with that. But we weren't thinking about that stuff back then. Yeah, because otherwise we learned quickly that Guile was like too good. And we quickly learned that one player had the advantage because it's a fight to get to that character, right? If it's a fresh game, where it's just in the attract mode and you both start at the same time, you guys are rushing to that slot. And guess who's going to win every time? One player. Because one player is on Ryu, and all they have to do is hit left and they're on Guile, whereas second player has to either hit up or down, then left.
Yeah.
And so So you know what? You better have a hitbox ready. You're not getting there in time.
Let me ask from a history standpoint here. Was there? So when I think of character selection in a game, like it's kind of a lot of like self-expression and whatnot, and that seems to be like par for the course in video games in today's day and age. But my understanding with Street Fighter, I can't think of an earlier incarnation of a video game that lets you pick drastically different characters to play as in an arcade game.
I can't think of that.
Yeah, I mean, I could think of like maybe the only thing I could think of is like some beat 'em ups. Maybe like like Final Fight, but I mean even then the game is still like 98% the same. You just mash punch, you get a 4-hit combo. You walk up to him, you get the grab, you hit him, slam. Hit two buttons, it doesn't move. It's just that the move just looks different, but they all function relatively the same, right?
So I had this whole like spiel about how like your character selection ties into your like identity and expression and whatnot. But it's interesting to hear from your story, Scott, that like it was less. It's not like everybody acknowledged that all the characters were different from each other and then used that as an opportunity for expression. It ended up being instead like, no, like just pick the character you're familiar with or pick the character that you think is good immediately. Because like did arcade audiences at the time like consider characters to be that form of expression, or was it really just like a gold rush race all the time, like just go pick the best character? Did they respect the depth of the character at that time?
No, I think you still saw all the women picking Chun-Li.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Girls,
Honda and Blanca. Honda was really popular, so was Blanca, and even Chun-Li for that same reason, because you could just mash buttons and a move comes out. And a lot of people like Guile because once they started figuring out the moves, like, oh, I don't have to do these motions. I mean, this was a thing back then. And Guile became very popular. And we learned quickly, too, that, oh, man, Sonic Boom's really good. It's like way better than the Fireball. We can't throw them as fast, but, man, we can follow that thing. We were thinking of Sonic Boom, low forward from day one. We figured out it was so instinctive. It was very intuitive. And a lot of people gravitate towards that. I don't know if we were thinking like, man, Guile's too good yet.
Yeah.
But he was super popular. And I think it had to do with the fact that you just did charge times and not motions. Because during World War, a lot of people had issues with motions because we were still figuring it out.
Okay. So a lot of the choices sounds like it was based on like I think it's demeaning to call it superficial, but like it wasn't level. Right.
Yeah, it wasn't based on how good the character was because we didn't know at first. It was just based off what does he look like, what does he sound like, because an arcade sound is important, right? And just that was really it. Is it fun? Is it a boy? Is it a girl? Or whatever the case may be. Just is the character good? Nah, it didn't matter. I mean, if that was the case, we would have been picking Dalsum all the time. No one was picking Dalsum. And Dalsum was really good. And everyone picked Shotos, and Shotos were the worst.
And it is interesting to see that, like you said, everybody gravitated towards Ryu and Ken immediately. It was the developers clearly like steered everybody in that direction with the default placings on the cursor. Mm-hmm. But one thing that I think is kind of a universal conversation for everybody is, did you start with Ryu or did you start with Ken, and why? And I'm kind of curious about all three of us on this call here, like which one and why.
See, I picked Ken. out of both of those because I just thought he was cool looking. Like Ryu's always been a little more generic, you know, and I just thought Ken immediately comes out as the guy with a little more attitude, a little more spunk, you know. Even then in Street Fighter 2, when the expression wasn't as evident, right? It felt like that. He just seemed like that type of character.
And that was before that was like you said, before the expression, like before he was on fire all the time, and before he was really different, right?
It just that's how he felt. And then Champion Edition came out, and they're like, let's give him a crazier DP, a really fast Tatsu, and all that. And then that's when it started to lend itself towards that now, you know. And I was like, yep, this is my character. I like this character, you know.
And then Benny, like, was it Ryu or Ken for you when you were learning?
Between those two, it was like, I don't know. I've always just have a preference for Ryu. To be honest, like it was more just like I didn't really care for Ken and like his blonde hair. I thought he just looked kind of whack. So I was just like, nah, I'm gonna do this other guy.
You don't like He-Man?
Yeah, exactly. Like he kind of had that like just that blonde mop kind of look, and I was just like, nah, that's not for me.
Yeah, I like the ST art in particular, where he's got like really long hair and it's got like that curve into the locks and stuff. Like he looks like he's from the 80s for sure.
Like that's super He-Man right there, dude.
Yeah.
I will say though, when Champion Edition came out and they changed Ryu's portrait because he looked older and he had like a little shrub and all, I was like, okay, he looks a lot cooler now.
It's less so like an anime protagonist and more so like
he just looked too boyish in World Warrior. He looked, I don't know if you can visualize what he looked like. He looked very boyish. And then in Champion Edition, they changed it. And I was like, okay, he looks pretty dope now. I'll use him a little more now.
I get you. Yeah, I kind of traveled a similar path where another like factor that I've noticed with a lot of Ryu and Ken origin stories is like it's tied to whoever you were rivals with when you were first learning fighting games. That person picked, like your neighbor, your friend, or your brother, your sister picked Ryu, and then you picked Ken, or vice versa. And in my case, my friend Eric picked Ryu, and this was like when I was like 19 or something, so significantly later than the average fighting game arcade goer. But he picked Ryu, and so I was like, okay, I'll pick Ken because I still recognize I want to learn fundamentals, but I want to be different enough from my friend. And then when Street Fighter 4 came out and I actually started playing competitively, I played Ryu because I still fundamentally clung to that idea of like, oh, this will teach me basics before I move on. So like it's almost weird where like I gravitated stylistically to Ken, but like numerically, I think I ended up with Ryu.
Yeah, see, because you came up in that era though. You know, and right. Obviously a lot has changed since then, so you have more to think about, right?
It's a compare and contrast on like that's why like everybody's got different reasons for picking characters, right? And it can go from the competitive standpoint to the visual standpoint, and that's actually kind of what I wanted to go towards because. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say too that to add to what you were saying is that I think that always holds true as well as when you said like, well, I didn't want to pick the same character as my friend, and that still holds true today. Like we have our groups and we're like, oh, you're picking him? I don't want to pick him, man. You know, and that's the other thing too. You see that a lot. You see like low tier warriors and all that stuff. I want to pick this guy because no one else is using them. Yeah. And I feel like, you know, that's going to be their way. They want to carve their niche, you know, and they can express themselves better because they're creating the tech on their own.
Yeah.
So what do you think draws people to? Like I guess going back to the arcade era, like what drew people to specific characters? Like as like let's fast forward maybe like 5-6 years when Street Fighter 2 is a little bit more mature. We're into ST at this point, or at least a little bit further than that, and everybody knows how to play the game, and they've decided on characters that they want to play. Like what was driving people's mindsets during that era when choosing games?
Oh yeah. I mean, at that point, we're starting to look at who's good.
Okay.
Who's good? Because obviously we now have the mindset in there. Who's doing the damage? You know, who's controlling the space better? You know, I mean, we figured that out pretty quickly. By the time ST or even Hyper Fighting was around, even Champion Edition, we were already at that point where we were thinking about that stuff. You know,
Okay.
there's a big reason why in Champion Edition everybody picked Guile and Bison. They were clearly the best characters, and we knew exactly why they were good. We've already figured it out. You know,
Okay.
so a lot of people picked those two characters. A lot of people picked Ryu because he had invincible Tatsu. You know, it was invincible on startup. It was invincible on landing. It's pretty stupid.
Yeah.
And we knew he had a fast fireball. And I'm like, this thing is ridiculous. And then Cam, we're like, man, this dude does damage because of his DP buff. You know, now that we started seeing these changes when we went from World War to Champion Edition, and we're like, oh, okay, now we're starting to see this stuff, right? We're starting to see all these little differences or like how much they affect the game. And then now we're starting to be a little smarter in our character selections. We're starting to figure out matchup knowledge. You know, all these things are already starting to come into play back in 92.
Okay.
These are definitely becoming a thing, right? But at the end of the day, like still people were picking based off like, do I relate to this character stylistically? I want a character that does more damage. I want a character that just turtles all day or whatever. People are already thinking about that, you know?
Okay. So
Yeah.
if we chase that last angle down, so like, you know, you're in this era, you're like, you put yourself in that era, and like, what were you looking for in a character at that point in time?
Damage. I want damage.
Okay.
And whenever I use Ken and I get like the standing fierce DP, and I'm just like, it always felt so good. It always felt so good. And then when I learned how to do like cross up into fierce DP for like 70%, you're like, oh yeah, that's the stuff right there. And I'm like, that's so good.
The big
That's so
crunchy
good.
numbers.
Yeah. That was one thing, but at the same time, I also knew fireballs were really strong, so I was like, I want to make sure I have a character with a fireball, and I want to be able to control my my space, you know. And it's funny because you know when I first started out, that's all I'm doing is fireball DP, fireball DP, fireball DP, and then Champion Edition came around, and I was like, all right, I really starting to learn how to use my normals now, but I'm still recognizing fireball DP is really solid. And I want to keep doing that because, like, when I would gravitate, I tried to learn, like, you know, Blanca or Chun-Li before she had a fireball, and I was like, not for me. I wanted a character with fireball all the time, and I need like some type of Dragon Punch. So I always gravitated back then, early on, to Shoto's and Guile, just for that simple reason.
Okay, so Space Control fireballs.
I felt like they just had the most options. They could play any style.
Okay.
Yeah, and I like to hit buttons.
You do like to hit buttons. That was a recurring.
I like to play. I like to play the game. I like to play the game, so I'm never going to play someone like Honda where I'm holding down back and just sitting there, and it's just like, it's not for me. So you'll never see me pick characters like that.
That's a good. So speaking of Honda, Benny, did you play Honda back then in ST, or were you playing somebody else?
Well, when it came to like World Warrior, like that was like, man, how old was I? 9 years old. And it was just like, yeah, other than like, you know, Ryu or whatever, like eventually like the gravitation to Honda or to even Guile was just more like Scott was saying, like understanding like the moves or like how to do those moves. Like, yeah, because I did kind of have trouble with like, you know, kind of the motions at the time, but you know, mashing hands, it's like, oh, I could do that, you know. And you know, people, you know, initially when you play, you know, you're playing your friends and stuff, and especially I think that I don't know if the World Warrior cab had like the move sets on it. I don't remember that it did.
Nope.
So it was just like, you know, so you know,
none of them
it'd be
did.
us kids. It'd be us kids at the bowling alley, and it's just like a couple of them were doing moves, and then like you'd see Chun-Li, and then like you just, you know, you're like watching their hands, and you see them mash kicks, and you do that, and you see the other person mash hands, and it's like, oh, I could do that.
Yep.
You know, because you know that's how you were trying to like learn stuff, because there was kind of like a gap for me in terms of like I didn't play like in the arcades like all the time, or you know, any kind of like competitive stuff. It was more like go to the mall, go play the arcade over there, and then like when Street Fighter was released on Super Nintendo, then I was just basically kind of like playing at home with my sisters or playing by myself, playing arcade mode, that kind of thing. And then again, just going back to the arcade, seeing who was there, like that kind of thing.
Okay, so it's kind of similar to today's day and age where you can practice at home and then take that to locals, right?
Yeah, yeah, because like I don't know, like I just eventually like I just gravitated to playing Honda like just more, and then it wasn't until what was it, Hyper Fighting on 360, like that came out. Like it wasn't the best experience, but I mean to me it was like I could play Street Fighter 2 against anybody in the world, like cool. And like it's funny because it's like it was like me in Alaska, and then I would always play my friend that lived here in Arizona, and he'd play Ken, and we would just like every now and then we just sit down, just run sets for 30 minutes, maybe whatever, and just keep playing and go back and forth. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. Like I remember I think I posted a screenshot on Facebook or something. It was just like how many wins I had or something, and Scott was like, oh man, you're playing that laggy piece of trash or whatever, and I'm just like, hey man, it's like that's all I got.
Hey man, you had to deal with what you got.
Yeah,
and we didn't have many options then.
Yep.
So I was thinking of Honda, and Honda doesn't have very many options, but it sounds like hands were kind of like the big thing that that forced you to gravitate towards them originally. Then it sounds like, Benny.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like it was just one, like actually, like having a move that I could see that I could do. So it was just like, hey, I can do something besides the normals. Because like especially like kids and stuff, or like you see it in Mortal Kombat all the time. Like people sweep, right? Like that's your natural thing. Is like once people figure out sweep, and it's just like, all right, I'm going to sweep you, and then like if your friend doesn't block it, I'm going to sweep you again. I'm going to sweep you again, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like to see something else and see somebody do something else, and I was like, oh, okay, I can do hands, and then like. And then I mean I don't know, just his kind of character look too, like the whole game's kind of silly, right? It's excuse me, it's not steeped in realism or anything. You got people throwing fireballs, you got electric electric troll, I don't know, electric beast over there with with
powered by
Blanca.
eels and chlorophyll.
Yeah, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
So here I was just like, here's this guy that just slaps the crap out of you, and like he flies across the screen like a missile, and I'm just like, okay, this is gonna be my dude.
and again, it's like it's the everyone that gravitated towards Honda, other than maybe they liked the way he looked, it was the 100 hand slap. It did so much damage, especially when they gave him the ability to move forward, because he didn't have that originally. But in Champion Edition, it would auto move forward when he did the heavy one, and sometimes it's randomly unblockable.
Yeah.
You'll like block the first one, and you're stuck at block stun, and then they just become unblockable, and it does so much damage. So that's alluring, right? You're like, man, I'm getting all this free damage, and I'm just spamming this button.
Yeah. Well, that speaking of hands and like just spamming it, like that was one of the things like I always ran into the wall like in arcade mode, right, and get the Balrog. And like you could literally just stand there with Honda and spam hands, and Balrog just charges into you all the time. You just take his life away. Yeah, so man. Like every time I would get into that wall, like it would just be like, man, let me go back to Honda, and then like I'd progress through, get to Bison, and it's like, all right, who do I want to see the ending for, right? So it's just like it was kind of like that kind of thing too, like the damage and just like just being able to like spam that.
That's a good point. That's a good point right there too. That was another thing. You when you were playing in the arcade back then, also. That helped you dictate your characters as well, because you wanted to play through and see everybody's ending. You wanted to play through the CPU, right? And you would just like, I want to see their ending, and then you would start playing that character and seeing if you like it, like a trial, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So that was a thing too.
So like the character's strength versus the CPU plays a role as well, basically.
It can be, but I mean, like I say, you just wanted to try them out, but because you wanted to see their ending.
Yeah.
You wanted to beat it with them, right? Because that was still kind of a thing back then,
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh wait, I actually kind of like this guy.
Yeah.
I can kind of relate to the hands conversation. Again, I'm not an arcade player. I didn't play ST or a Street Fighter 2 in general. But being adjacent to it, at least is in the video game space, and seeing what a pop culture icon Chun-Li was in particular, I remember being in high school, and one of my my high school friends was a rich kid and had their own like MAME cabinet and had ST on there. And so one day I just, or was it ST? I think it was the first one, World Warrior, because there were only 8. And I picked Chun-Li because I knew just from pop culture that she could do the lightning legs, and and like so in the same vein as what you mentioned, Benny, like it was something that I could do because at that point I didn't know how to use a joystick or anything, so I just mashed on it and the legs came out and it was
Yeah.
really fucking cool.
It
Yeah.
felt good. It felt good.
Yeah, yeah, and at that point you're like, okay, so this is how you win the game, and you use that until the next time you need to find something to win the game with. But that's actually kind of leads into my next line of questioning for y'all is, you know, I've watched you guys have basically just described parallel or like diverging paths as far as play style goes, because Scott, you were looking for what was meta at the time and as well as high offensive, high damage. And then Benny, you picked based on aesthetics and execution ability, but then that gravitated you towards a turtle style character. And so, you know, during this era, you guys, I imagine, are trying things out and feeling out your styles a lot. But what kept you on the path to staying offensive and or staying defensive?
I mean, it's simple for me. I just like hitting buttons. That's it. I like hitting buttons and I like doing damage when I can. I like to play the game. It really just is. There's really no like deep meaning towards it or anything. It's really that simple for me.
It just wants to be active.
I want to be active. I want to be an active player.
What's another kind of character archetype that you found resonated with that desire?
I started liking like mix-up characters to help complement that more. I generally was not a mix-up. I didn't really gravitate towards mix-up characters too much. Really, not until Street Fighter 4 with Sakura, and I just saw the EX Tatsu. I'm like, that move is pretty cool, and she plays nothing like Alpha. So that made it a little interesting for me. But I knew I could still play offensive. But I was like, all right, now I got like mix-ups. So now I'm starting to think about that stuff when I pick my characters.
So Sakura was probably the time when you started transitioning.
Yeah. At least, I would agree. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then Benny, we all know that you stuck with Honda like through and through, but I'm curious about like what kept you, like I've seen you gravitate towards Guile as well. So clearly you have like a defensive streak to you. And I was curious about like what drew you to that
just
stuff.
us talking about it made me, and just like the bringing up the arcade mode again, like it really stems from that, because like when I played arcade mode, I'm at home by myself just trying to get through the game, whatever, beat the CPU. It was like I would naturally kind of gravitate to a defensive style, because like they would just beat the shit out of you. Like I don't know if they're reading my inputs or what, but it's just like if I tried to go on the offensive, like I'm getting swept. Like every time I'm walking, like I'm just like getting beaten footsies by a level 8 CPU or whatever, and I'm just like, okay, I can't beat this guy this way. Let me turtle and let me hold charge, and I'll let him come at me, and I'll play reactionary. Because like I said, like when it came to like World Warrior, it was Balrog. Like I would switch to Honda, use hands, usually kill him. Vega would kind of be sometimes be an ass, but like I found an exploit with Chun-Li. I think it was like neutral jump roundhouse. Like if you just kept on spamming that, like that would like beat everything he did. And then I'd get to Sagat, and then it was kind of like almost the same thing. Like I, at that point I was just like, okay, I could kind of, well, if I could fire or get through the fireballs and stuff like that, I was pretty much okay beating him. And then when it came to Bison, it kind of came back to that whole turtle style. Like I would have to react to whatever his Psycho Crusher or his stomps or whatever. Because like, yeah, I mean, Bison's like, if you've ever played Street Fighter 2 arcade mode, Bison's just cheap. Like he just Psycho Crushers and throws you around, and I'm just like, what kind of crap is this, man? So it's just like, it was like, so I'd play Honda, like I'd wait for the Psycho Crusher, reactionary headbutt, and counter it that way. So it kind of just, I kind of built up that style from wanting to beat the arcade mode all the time as a kid. So it's just like that was the way that I found to be successful against that.
Okay, so it's like you're so busy playing reactive to the computer all the time that you could take that same
reactive style. It forged
your
style.
Yeah, exactly. Fascinating. Oh wow. Okay.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, you go put level 8 CPU Bison, and you're gonna get you're gonna get scissor kicked as you tap forward, you get scissor kicked, you get it's all kinds of
because that version and they could do charge moves without doing charge.
Yeah, exactly. They're pulling off the impossible.
So that's another angle to look at this, right? Is that the other divergence is that Benny, you seem to be sticking exclusively with charge characters, and we talked about that it being about ease of use and whatnot, and
Yeah, execution.
and execution. Yeah, and Scott, like, did you find yourself favoring motion characters or charge characters at that point in time?
I probably favored motion characters just so I always had the move at the ready at all times. But I didn't have a problem with charge characters because like I used Guile a lot back then.
Oh, right, because
Yeah,
it
so
almost okay.
but and even then I used Charlie and the Alphas. You know, it like I wasn't. Yeah, charge was fine to me. It's just that's not my preferred style.
Yeah.
But it just depends. It really just comes down to what feels good for me. Does it feel good immediately? If it feels, if it's like, I'll know within like maybe the first 10 to 15 minutes, maybe if I want to play this character after I'm playing him.
Can you give me an example of when you tried a character and said this character doesn't feel good?
What was it? I would say, man, it happened a lot in X versus Street Fighter. I had a problem with that, yeah, because I started out with Ken, and I'm like, I hate this character. He doesn't feel good to play. I feel like I can't do anything with him, and it turned out, yeah, he's the worst character in that game, right? So it took me a while to figure out stuff there. Tekken, I was like, I remember when I was starting to get heavy into Tekken, and I was going around characters, I just couldn't figure it out, and then I landed on Paul, and then that got me into it. Oh, Third Strike was another one. Too Tall's in the chat, he can vouch for this. I hated playing Third Strike for a long time. I would play like Yun, who, because you know he's stupid good. I would play Ken. I know you're giving me that look like you played Yun. You know? Well, I started with Ibuki. I remember when Street Fighter 3 new generation came out. I started with Ibuki because like, man, she's awesome looking, right? And then like within 10 minutes, I was like, I hate this. And I think it had to be a lot to do with that. I couldn't gel with it. And then I left this. So I never bothered playing 3 at all until Third Strike later on, around 2002, when I played with like Too Tall and Raph and them. And I still hated it, and Jeff. And I still hated the game. It didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, these characters don't feel good. Ryu, Ken, didn't matter. These are good characters. Ken, Yun, they don't feel good. Like what? These are good characters, right? And I remember, I'm sure Too Tall remember this story. We were at Raph's house playing, and they wanted to play. I'm like, all right, whatever. And I accidentally picked Remy. I see they're a charge character, right? And it just clicked. It clicked. And then all of a sudden I like Third Strike because I found a character that just felt good at that time. And I felt it immediately. But I never would have thought of it because I knew Remy was not that good of a character. Right?
That's the part that I'm trying to like really parse right now is, when something feels good, it means that it's satisfying to do it. And oftentimes that's tied with a positive result, like you win the video game. But
I did win. So I did good. But don't get it twisted though. I mean, I'll still get my ass kicked, right? But I felt better results, and I think that has to do with the fact that this character just felt good to do things. It's helping me make me understand the game better. All those things, it just felt good. And I don't pick a character based on, is he good? I mean, maybe it might sway me a little bit, but it's got to feel good. Because what's the point of playing if it doesn't feel good?
Yeah.
You can't force me to play it if it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. It was just like, I think because I used to have a blog set up, like a personal website that I was just doing like as a project, and I had these like player profiles, and I had asked people questions about it, and it was just like, I think one of the questions was like, what's like the best advice you would give to somebody starting out fighting games, and like I think a couple of people brought up the whole fact is like, choose a character and find a character that you love first. Because then you'll find the experience of learning the game a lot more enjoyable. So
I 100% agree with that. I do the same thing. I tell everybody, when they tell me what character should I pick, and some people will say just pick a top tier, and I'm like, no, you don't want to do that. No. Especially if you're just learning. Like, pick a character that is fun and it feels good for you, and then you go from there. Because that's what I did. Because that's how it was a Third Strike. Once I learned Remy, and I finally got my bearings with the game in. Then all of a sudden I moved to Oro. Then I moved to Shotos. And then I moved to other characters. And it all fell into place eventually, right? But in that game, I was just like, I'm just going to go to these characters. And it didn't work. Because it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun, and it didn't feel right, and it didn't help me understand the game. Remy was the character that got me to understand that game.
Yeah.
And then I was able to move forward from there. Now I never use them.
I feel like a lot of this has to do.
Bad.
It's less about it's quantitative over qualitative, right? Where it's less about the character and more about how much time do you put in to really like figure out the game. But the problem is that if you're not motivated to actually put the time in because your character doesn't feel good to play, then you're not going to put the time in, and you're not going to learn the fucking game.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was gonna say it's funny that Scott brings up Remy, because that's like I played Third Strike throughout the years. Like, it's not something that I'd played regularly, and I'd play Ryu of all the characters because I didn't really care for any of the others. And then it was just like, then I found out Remy was charged, and I was just like, but the only reason I didn't want to play him was I really hate the way that he looks. I hate his whole aesthetic. I hate everything. I just hate the way the long hair, the victory pose with like his like half shirt open, and he's like this like skinny ass guy, and I'm just like, man, I was like, he looks so whack. But it's just like, but when I play the game, I'm just like, everything just like, if the character itself feels good, right? Like for me, like if you look through my like the characters that I played in all the games, like when Alpha was in the arcades, like I naturally gravitated to Charlie because I was like, oh, he looks like Guile. He probably plays like Guile. And sure enough, it was like, oh, he's got a flash kick, sonic boom. Yeah, this is who I'm going to play. And like, I didn't really get in depth with that game, but it was just like, that's just kind of the, the thing with Street Fighter, like, fireballs, sonic booms, charge moves, whatever. Like, I just naturally gravitate to all those charge characters. And it's just like, usually it's the most simple ones because it's like, in Third Strike, there's Urian, but I could never do all that crazy shit that I see.
Right, so that's an anomaly because it is charged, but you have the charge partition, which is extremely difficult.
Yeah, so you got to do like the headbutts into the Aegis reflector and all this other stuff, and like I see it looks cool, but like I've tried doing it myself, and it's just like, man, it's like I don't know, like stuff doesn't click with me with that. Where it's just like, yeah, Remy sucks, but you know what? I'm enjoying the game and enjoying the way that character plays and what I can do with them.
Yeah.
And that that makes me want to play that game more than saying, like Scott said, I could pick Urian, who's a definitely a upper tier character compared to Remy, but am I gonna be happier playing that character if I can't do what
it may not work
expected of them?
Exactly. It may not work for you. So that's what I'm saying. Like, pick a top tier just doesn't work with a lot of people. Yeah, there's a lot of players out there that can just pick a top tier and make it work. Yeah, they're just good at it. Abe is very good at it. Abe is very good at it because he knows he's a good player. Dan Light was good at that back in the day. He just copied whatever and just picked any character that was strong, and he knew how to do it. I can't do that. I've learned a lot about myself that I can't do that because the character first and foremost has to feel good and has to be fun. If they're not any of those, I'm not learning it. I can't.
Yeah, and just to on top of this whole like character selection discussion, like I'm kind of in an interesting spot with this with my son G, like because the player the character that he gravitates to right now in Street Fighter games is Geef, of all characters.
God.
It's just like I was trying to get him to play like Ryu or whatever and say, hey, let's learn some basic footsies and stuff, and he's like no, I want to play Geef. And I'm like, okay. And like, I see him struggle because like, I'll play projectile characters and it's like, I'm not going to take it easy on him. I'm going to be like, here, this is the struggle you're going to have to deal with. And he's like, oh, that's okay. Like, I'll play through it. But it's just funny kind of seeing like, that's just who he wants to play. And like, I'd rather him, it's that old thing, just like with your parents, right? Like, you don't want to be forced into doing things. I'm not going to be like, you know what, you're going to play Ryu and you're going to learn this game and you're going to learn it correctly. It's just like, no, you play who you want. And if you're having fun doing that and, occasionally you'll get in and you'll get your SPDs in and stuff like that, then cool. Like, as long as you're having fun and as long as it's, enjoyable for you, that's what counts to me.
It sounds like he likes the struggle too. I feel like Geef players love the struggle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, coming from me too, like the Honda players, like that's a struggle too. I mean, talk to other people that hate Honda, and they're just like, man, he doesn't struggle, blah blah blah. I was just like, dude, you go navigate the minefield that's Sagat and all this other crap. I was like, that's part of the enjoyment of me playing a character like that too. Is like, get through that, and then it's my turn. Now you get to play my game, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I went through kind of a similar situation with with my fiance rather, similar to the G situation, but I did kind of the opposite. I did the like, hey, you should learn this way kind of thing, because I did try to take it like analytically and be like, learning a Shoto is a good idea, but maybe try learning Cammy if you want to play a girl character, all that other crap, right? And she ended up with Falk. And I went so far as to say, like, don't learn Falk because she's not going to teach you shit. And she's bad, and also like I went all up on that, and then so she listened to me and then tried to play Cammy, but she just was not having fun and just didn't end up playing. And eventually, like, I showed her like the one of the costumes for Falk, like the Halloween costume. It's probably one of the better designed ones in the game. And then suddenly she's like grinding ranked in silver. And so it's like, that was a big lesson for me to learn, which was like, if somebody wants to play it a certain way, that is the best avenue for them to get better at it. It's kind of like when like I play guitar off and on for over a decade now, and sorry, 2 decades at this point. But I realized that I would never have actually like stuck with it if I was never playing the songs that I wanted to, because I learned piano as a kid, and the piano teacher was always like, you need to learn, you need to learn all these specific classical music. It needs to be
songs you don't like.
Yeah, I didn't care about. And every now and then she tossed me like a song that was like from pop culture that I'd like to play and stuff. But ultimately, I didn't stick with it because I didn't want that. I wanted to just play the songs that I wanted. And it was a big lesson for me to learn that when pressuring Jess to play a different character and pressuring other people in general, And
then eventually she may end up down that path where she plays a more solid character or expands her horizons with it. But, it's all about getting your feet wet first.
Yeah.
And that's why I just think it's bad to tell people to pick top tier or whatever when they're new.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just doesn't work. That's why, man, I always hate hearing that question. Who should I pick? I'm like, what? What works for you? What feels good? Who cares? You should not. Yeah. You're not good enough to understand what a tier list even means.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Or for it to even like apply to you. Like, I mean, like I would always say, like, I would always say, like, look at the looks first. Like, if there's a character with a certain look that you gravitate to, try that first, and then see if they mesh with you in terms of like movements and moveset like that. Because like a classic example of that was like Manat. When I saw Manat and I saw the trailer for Manat, I was like, oh man, she looks fucking cool. Like at the time I was playing Overwatch, and my favorite character in that was Farah, the Egyptian girl. So I was just like, oh, Manat. I was just like, okay. I was like, I'm just gonna play Manat. When Manat gets released, I go into those trials. I got through like 4, and then I was just like, nah, I can't do this shit, man. Like, this is not for me. And I was just like, well, that's I'm not even gonna attempt to like sink time into this and try to learn her, because I was just like, that's beyond me.
You understood your limit.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's also like the idea of like specialty archetype characters. Like locally we have a player named Akita who is like traditionally a zoner character. Like he'll play Manat or he'll play Dalsim, and I think in other games that I've heard of had him play, like CVS2 and whatnot, he'll play like zoner characters. And so like, I know we don't really. I guess Scott, you played a little bit of Dalsim too back in the day. Like, I am curious about like, what do you think gravitates people towards playing zoner characters or keep away characters, and then also same thing for grapplers?
I think those are pretty simple. They just want to play their game and just not let them have any fun, really. Okay. So think about it. Think about when you play against a Dalsim. When you're fighting against Dalsim, what do you end up doing a lot? You end up spending a lot of your life bar just trying to get to them, right?
Yeah,
and they like that. They like wearing you down.
Yep.
That's what it is. It's like, I'm going to fight on this side of the screen. You fight on your side. Don't come past here. And that's their goal. And that's just what they want to do. They want to keep you down and just wear you out. It may be a person that doesn't really like combos. You know, there's a lot of old school players that they're not good with combos, period. So they like to gravitate towards these characters that could just wear you out single hits over and over again, right? And it's frustrating. Is it not frustrating fighting against Dalsum? There's a reason why everyone hates Dalsum. He's frustrating to fight against, right?
Yep,
he's very frustrating because the thing is that when you're fighting the rest of the cast, but then you come against Dalsum or even Zangief, you have to approach your game very different. You could kind of have this like autopilot style versus most of the cast, and a lot of it will work. And then you got to build it. Then you got to start digging into the nuances, right? But with especially like Dalsum, you have to completely change your game plan to get around him.
Yep.
You have to start throwing out normals full screen away. Like you wouldn't do that against anybody else.
Yeah, so
you're gonna throw your way to harm's way all the time, and hopefully that maybe one of their normals is eventually gonna miss, and then you go in on them, and then run. Then you can start executing your game plan. But you gotta get through this wall first, and it's hard. And then with Geef, I think a lot of people they like that they'll deal with struggling, but then once they get in, it creates it's that psychological aspect, right? That fear. It's the fear. It's the fear that it's like when you watch Snake Eyes play Street Fighter 4, right? He's not doing SPDs, but you know what? Everybody's thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like it's the fear of it, right? He's terrifying players. And I think a lot of people like that because no other archetype really does that. Right.
So it's like
they're very unique archetypes. And I think people are looking at that type of stuff.
It almost sounds like it's like an emotional manipulation thing where it's like you're trying to elicit a specific emotion out of your opponent, and that's giving you the endorphins.
Sure. I mean, we all know that a lot these games are heavily psychological.
Yeah.
You know, and those two really bring out that aspect really hard.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you know, from my transition to playing Dalsum in 5, like, you know, the psychological aspect of fighting people, like Honda had a certain way of pissing people off. Like if it was something stupid, like I know Rick would always be pissed off because of like the janky the hurt boxes, right? Or like, you know, stuff would whiff and he'd just like, what? It's only on Honda. This is dumb. And it was like, and then when I switched to playing to Sim in 5, it was like that opened up a whole new world to me in terms of like psychologically like messing with people, because like I'd play Geef players and it's just like Scott said, like you got to navigate your way through those limbs and, you know, throw fierce or try to sweep them from full screen. And it's just like, as a player, like you're not used to doing that. It's just like, okay, walk and block fireball, you know, make my way in. And it's like, now I got to try to get a read on this guy. And it's just like, I'm pretty sure I had more people rage quit on me playing Dalsum just because like they didn't want to navigate that.
It's different. It's just
even
different.
The character select screen. Yeah. Like I see people at the character select screen, like you see the screen load and it's just like, and it's just like, oh, what? You don't want to play Sim? Like, oh, come on, man.
I can't tell you how many times playing Alpha 3, whether it be in the arcade or on Fightcade or whatever, and if I even pick Sim, they're like, you know, or even when you fight against a Sim in ST, because he's really stupid in that game too. But yeah, it's just, you know, they don't want to deal with your bullshit, so they're gonna give them their bullshit. You know, it's like, so I don't want to deal with your bullshit, so I'm just gonna let you play on that side of the screen the whole time. Don't come over here. I don't want you to execute your game plan at all.
To apply kind of an analytical lens to it here, I think that a lot of the zoner mindset is around the concept of tempo, where, you know, round one start, having advantage. Like I actually feel this when I started playing characters that have fireballs. Like if you have if your character has a fireball and then the other character doesn't, on round one start, you have advantage because you have the ability to play at a space that they may not excel at. And Dalsum is an extreme version of that, where he just has tempo all the time. And tempo, I think I took that from as a card game term, but basically he gets to dictate the flow of the match at all points in time.
Yeah.
And I feel like that interplay is present in every single matchup. It's just that how badly that's skewed is really based on the character. Like, so when we were playing the 6 beta, one of the issues when I was playing Chun Li versus like Scott or Jamie, right, is that I knew by default when I was playing that I have control of the match. I get to choose when I throw the fireball, and it's on you to react to it. I get to choose when you get to choose when to jump, but it's ultimately in response to what I can do.
Well, you
So
did,
I get,
right?
yeah, it's my turn basically in the
Yep.
neutral. And I
And
feel
that's
like,
exactly what you want me to do. And that's what you want me to do.
yeah. And then the GIF, like the GIF value proposition is the inverse of that, which is I deliberately cede control because I would much rather kill you after you make that mistake and then force you into the blender, the game plan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the complete opposite in terms of like this like psychological thing, right? Like you're willing to kind
Yeah.
of put yourself in that situation because you're just like, once I get over this hump, like yeah, then you're in my world kind of thing.
Right. And like both like outlooks I think are two pieces to the same puzzle. Like I'm an analytical player. I think Benny, I consider you like a heart player. I have no idea what kind of player you would consider yourself, Scott. Because
I
I've
think
seen you
maybe
go
I'm a blend.
yeah, I've seen you go mind, I've seen you go body,
Heart.
heart
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. I've done all of it. Yeah. Because I mean, it was a lot of heart back then, a lot of reads, but
Yeah.
so I still keep a little bit of that with me, but I still do a lot of mind as well, obviously. But yeah, I'm kind of like a blend.
I getcha. And it's for those unfamiliar, what I'm just referred to is that Core Gaming kind of created some archetypes for how you would describe a fighting game player play style, and they break down
Great
into
video.
yeah, it's a fantastic video. Go watch it. It's they break it down into heart, mind, and body. Heart being you play by feel. It's less so about like parsing frame data and more about the psychological stuff. Uh, Mind being the technical aspect of it. You're doing layers and layers of mix-ups, or you're trying to plan for a bunch of different situations and optimize. And then body being, I believe, the execution side of it, and people being looking for the showmanship around it too, and the style. And again, like you can see how those archetypes and those desires in a character overlap with people's character choices. And I'm not really
Yeah.
sure at what point I was driving towards ultimately there, but I was like, I just need to explain this shit.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean that does go into character selection as well, right?
Yeah.
It's like, do I want to play this character that's super technical?
Yep.
Or
Exactly.
do I want
That's what I
to?
was gonna say. Yeah.
Yeah, is it going to lend more to me my instincts? That's definitely a thing. Or do I want someone that's heavy ass execution? Like I like my execution, but I also don't like it to be insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I do remember I dabbled a little bit with Sea Viper and stuff like that. And again, in 4 when Vanilla came out, and I'm like, man, this is a little too much out of my wheelhouse. Like I'm not good at mashing the coordinated mashing, where you're pianoing. I'm not good at that stuff. I can't do that. I just out of my wheelhouse. And I just wasn't comfortable ever really doing all the feint cancels with Viper. So I'm like, I think that's probably a little too far up to where I want to do. A little bit out of my comfort, So, and then of course, like Fuerte shit, I'm like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. See, that's always surprising to me because, like, in Alaska, I had one of my friends there. He started with Sea Viper, and like he kind of came a little bit. I think it was a little bit after we had started. I want to say a few months, if that. And like I remember he came into the scene and he started with Sea Viper, and my first thought was just like, why would you pick that as your first character? Like what? Like that's like like that's not something like I would think of. Like I like I said, like I would look at the move sets, I'd see stuff, and I'd be like, yeah, that's not stuff for me. So it's just like I don't know what exactly gravitated him to her, but it's just like that's always a kind of interesting choice when I see people like first pick up a game and they're just like just go straight to somebody like that.
So
well, probably they're not thinking about that stuff either. Maybe they're not at a level where they're thinking about, or they can even play at that level to even think about that type of execution.
So I'm somebody who actually traveled that exact journey as far as if we're firmly in Street Fighter 4 territory right now, right? Like where I started with Ryu to like learn how to like do a fireball motion and stuff. But then it was I remember specifically it was Momochi versus some other Street Fighter 4 player that doesn't play anymore, and it was like one of those 144p YouTube videos that was captured off arcade footage.
Amazing.
And you couldn't make out anybody, but that was my first instance of seeing that character in action and being like, I want to do that. And so kind of like what I mentioned earlier about the arcades of being like, here's an option, here's a way of showing you to do how to do something. Just do that one cool thing. You don't actually have to know what this character is. Just do that cool thing. And Viper did it was a cross-up burn kick, instant TK cross-up burn kick. And, so at the time I'm like, I can barely throw a fireball right now, but I really want to do that. And I did, and I basically left Ryu before I learned enough about footsies and fighting game stuff, fundamentals, in favor of trick shots, essentially. I just want to keep layering these trick shots over and over again. I want to be able to do TK burn kick. I want to be able to do meterless FADC. I want to do all the seismo cancels, fierce feint fierce, all that other stuff. And that held me back very much as far as like learning how to play fighting games, where there were people that I believe, like Reese is a really good example, where he and I started roughly around the same time, but he skyrocketed in my opinion because he didn't get caught up in the weeds of learning an intricate technical character that had little to no carry over to other characters. So I think that to touch back on that fiance story from earlier, it's almost as if like I was trying to avoid that happening to Jess, where I picked up Viper too early, stunted my growth initially, eventually went back and filled it in. But even then, I filled it back in with a Buki, and I did like Vortex shit instead. So it was still just setup after setup after setup.
Yeah.
And so I didn't learn a lot of basic fundamentals when switching to a high execution character. So it's taken me like a long time to like really figure out what I wanted in a character. And I don't know if that means anything as far as insight into why your friend picked up Viper, Benny, but ultimately to me it was trick shots and wanting to look cool and wanting to be accepted by the community for doing trick shots.
You thought that was your path. That's what you thought your path had to be.
Yeah. It was like, hey, these players are really good, and I know I'm not going to get there, but at least I can find a different way to differentiate myself.
Yeah, you felt like if you picked say Shoto, you picked Ryu, I'm like, I don't know how to play this game. I'm going to look like an idiot trying to play it Shoto that everybody knows. So let me go pick this character that no one knows anything about yet, and now let me weasel my way into this.
Yeah, basically. And that's a whole nother archetype of player, which is like the character specialist or the guy that has something to prove, right?
Yes.
I want to go out of my way to show that this character can work. And we've seen that locally in our scene happen like in multiple ways. Like I've seen some people that just wanted to believe that Shenko had it going for her in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and tried really hard to make that work, and it didn't work. But I've also seen someone do that with Shuma Garath and then turn Shuma Garath into a meta character. Yeah. And so that's actually, to bring it back to an Arizona perspective, that's something that I think is really unique about our scene, in that we don't have a lot of like flock to top tier people. We have unique character specialists. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to kind of like touch on that as like a topic here. It'd be like, what do you think like drives character specialists? And I think, Benny, I consider you one of those a character specialist as far as Honda throughout the entirety of 4. Like what kind of like what drew you to sticking with Honda throughout all that, especially as he got nerfed?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing is just like, I mean, like I said, I don't gravitate to characters that are heavy execution, right? So it's just like, I mean, Honda's got the hand stuff, but I mean that's not like super hard. But it was more like, I don't know, I guess it's more of like a lacking thing in me. It's just like, I guess I don't feel like I feel like I'm gonna spread myself too thin trying to learn other characters, like, and then I'm gonna eventually go back, because it's just like I feel like I perform better learning one character and learning all the nuances of the matchups that character has to deal with, whether they're good or horrible or even or whatever, and just learning how to deal with all the different characters with one character than it is to kind of run into a wall, which is, I mean, it's kind of weird because it kind of counters what I said in terms of like the arcade mode in Street Fighter 2 back in the day, right? Like I would run into that wall, and then I'd be like, okay, let me pick the character that I can use to beat this. Whereas when I got competitive, it was more like, well, I don't want to pick another character because now I have to learn a whole nother set of matchups. I've got to learn all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's just like a a mental stack for me. That's a whole nother level. And like, there's only been one instance where I played another character. Well, I mean, I think I played Guile. I don't know. In Alaska, it was varied, but in here in Arizona, like, I think there's only one instance where I changed characters against somebody, and it was against Velociraptor, because Gokin and Honda, that matchup is hellish. Like, I just couldn't do it. Like, his fireball recovery was too fast. Like, he, John's really good at reading, like, when you're gonna jump and air fireballs and stuff like that, and it would like piss me off. And there was like one Ranbat or something where I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna pick Ryu. And like, I don't play Ryu on a competitive level. I play Ryu on a online troll level. Like, I would just mess with people online, and like, I did it, and I got, he destroyed me real quickly, and I was just like, no, back to Honda. And I was just like, that was like the one instance I think I ever did that, and I was just like, nah.
Okay, so like you wanted to stick to your guns basically, and then the one time that you deviated, it kind of galvanized you to continue sticking with your guns.
Yeah, it like backfired. And like I said, I think for me personally, I know some people, they'd be like, well, I know the basic game, or I know this and that, and like how to fight this character with my original character, and now I can play this new character with that has better counters to, or better ways to deal with what they're doing. Whereas for me, I'm just like, you know what, even if it's a bad matchup, like, I know the matchup though, and I'm willing to bet on myself that I know the matchup than I am to pick a different character and throw that in there.
And Scott, I've seen you I've seen you on the opposite end of the spectrum, where like in tournament match, I think I've seen you pick another character against me. So like, what motivates you to play multiple characters as opposed to being a character specialist?
Well, I mean, obviously, so you can cover more matchups, right? Or if maybe one day you're just not feeling it with that one character, right? It's just not gelling. You have those days where it's just not working out for you. Like, everyone's getting the reads on you, or whatever the case may be. Maybe everyone's just gotten used to your character that day. Time to flip it. Time to flip that script on them and just throw them a curveball, right? But over the time, especially after Street Fighter 4 era, where my time started getting more limited, I didn't play as many characters anymore, because contrary to what the industry says and the scene says, games have gotten harder. These games have gotten harder. I'm going to keep it a buck. These games are harder because there's a lot more things to look out for, right? You have more subsystems. Now you have to deal. You do have to deal with the frame data. Everyone's way more optimized because of YouTube, and training mode is so good, the spread information and all that stuff. So there's a lot more good players out there, and combine that with my limited time these days, I have to really focus on one character mostly. I'll dabble with another one, but I'll mostly focus on one, because anytime I start trying to main another one, I feel like that's time I'm losing learning the other character, right?
Got it.
Yep.
It becomes an internal fight all the time, because I was like, man, I really want to learn this character, but man, my other character is going to suffer because of this, and I don't know if I can afford to do that, right? Then that starts going back into the territory where I may have to start picking a better character that covers most of my matchups.
Yeah. I guess the difference that I'm seeing between how matchups are approached is, like, Benny, you mentioned that if you play another character, you basically have to learn the entirety of all. Like, if you switch from Honda to Ryu, then that means you need to learn all of Ryu's matchups now. But from Sabre's perspective, it's, if I play Blanca and Bison, and I run up against a Yun or something, then I'll play Blanca instead. And so I only need to know Blanca Yun. I don't need to know all of Blanca's matchups.
Yeah, just to cover certain matchups. Right. Yeah, that'd be the only reason why I usually switch. Is like, man, this character's not working, or whatever, or like, I historically have problems against this person, this player, right? And I know my character just never beats him. I always lose. So now I got to try to find an alternative way just to handle this one guy.
Okay, so it's a person-to-person interaction.
It could be, for me, it could be more person to person. It's a little bit of both.
Okay. This is another kind of, I guess if we're in the era of modern games right now as well. And so now the concept of, nerfing and buffing and changes throughout the game's life cycle becomes more at the forefront. And so people, I believe, will pick up, drop, or stick with characters based on balance patches. And so I guess I'm curious from your guys' perspective on the new games out right now, what would it, do you have some examples of hey, a balance patch impacted my ability to play this character and therefore I don't want to play this character anymore? Or, hey, a balance patch changed this character to be more interesting for me. And why is that more interesting to you now?
Well, I've never really switched a character based off a balance patch, because I remember, so in Street Fighter 4, I played Sakura, and in Super, I went to Cody, but it had nothing to do with balance changes. It had to do because I wanted to play Cody.
Yeah,
that was my guy, right? Okay. And then Arcade Edition came around. I will say that I wasn't too happy with the direction they were taking Cody, and Sakura was still really good. So then I started blending my time between those two. I guess you could say that, yeah, maybe a little bit, but it didn't really deviate too much. And then 5, obviously, it started with Laura season 1, and I was getting a little frustrated with her, and I was just like, but I switched to Balrog and a Urien. That was all within one season, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then they all became really good season 2, but it didn't really dictate. So it didn't really matter then. But even then, when season 3 came out, when I wasn't really playing as much, I still stuck with Urien because I just liked the character. And I don't think it would have mattered unless the character just became complete buns.
So they did that in the most recent season where they literally took his reversal away.
Right. But you know what? I look at that as who cares? Because the reversal wasn't. I would have stuck with him because I don't think that reversal was that good anyways. Because if you just did a meaty light, you were going to block it anyway.
True.
You're blocking it anyways because I think it had a 13 frame startup or whatever the case would be. I know my numbers are way off, but yeah, you just did a meaty light on my wake up. I can't reversal you, right? If you knew how to handle that on your offense, whatever. And then the only other reason you would use it is in the middle, in a little bit of neutral where you're not up in my face, and I might be able to throw it out there because it does look like it's quick. It seems, and or whatever, it still has its uses. I don't think that's enough. I mean, yeah, it sucks that you lose it, but against a really good player, you're not really losing much, in my opinion. It would not have deviated me from playing him.
Okay.
It has to be extreme. It has to be absolutely extreme. It'd have to be from playing Street Fighter 3 Second Impact. Let's say I'm a Shawn main who's super OP in that game, right? And then you go to Third Strike, and he's literally one of the worst characters ever made. That might deviate me.
Okay. And what's interesting is, well, we talked to a regular on our show is Old Man River Jeff, and he was playing at the top with Second Impact Ibuki, and then they put her in a wheelchair for Third Strike, right? And he stuck with her.
She's still pretty decent. She's still pretty good at Third Strike. Okay, fair enough. But yes, it was a big nerf. It was a big nerf. But yeah, Shaw was top worst ever. I mean, it's just they did it on purpose because of canonical reasons, right? And I don't think there was ever a Sean player that stuck around because it was just that bad. There is a limit, right?
Yeah.
There is a line that eventually, if it crosses it, that's too much.
That's what I'm interested in finding, though. So just take any fantasy fighting game character or any fighting game character that you've played in the past, like Benny. Let's talk Honda and 4, for example. I think you know that character in and out. What could they do to Honda that would make you stop playing the character?
I would say probably because with all the changes that happened to him, it was like a gradual thing, right? It wasn't just like a sudden like, all right, now he sucks. It was just like I think from Super to what was the next one? AE, right? I think that's when they changed his jab headbutt invincibility, and then they changed it to medium of all things, and like I guess they didn't want him to have a meterless reversal, and I'm just like, but it was like slow as hell anyway. I was like, if you're jumping at me and I can jab headbutt, like you're jumping at the wrong time. So it's just like, but to me, like that didn't really throw me off because I was just like, well, I'm still gonna use EX headbutt or normals or whatever, right? Like that wasn't a huge change. And then there was like the damage nerfs, but again, it was like, yeah, it was little things at a time. Like I think fundamentally, like if you took away his like his stand roundhouse or maybe like how safe hands were, like that would probably make me want to change characters. Because even like the change to the EX headbutt, because before it used to push you back hella far, like nobody could punish it, you know.
Yeah.
And then they changed that to where like, you know, you ended up like almost like directly in front of people and like you were getting punished and then people
Good
were just like,
change.
oh yeah, finally I can do something.
Good change.
And like even then, like, you know, that didn't really like kill me. It just made me a little bit more, you know, hesitant to kind of use that in certain situations. But like, yeah, that wasn't like a big enough change to where I was gonna be like, you know what, I can't do it anymore. But yeah, I think for me it would have been like the stand roundhouse because that was just a really good normal that hit low, and then and
yeah.
then the and then the hands, yeah. If they had just changed hands and just made it like unsafe or something, where I couldn't just like apply pressure and you know kind of just dictate the pace that way, then I probably would have switched at that point.
I guess we have proof of that in 5, huh? Because Honda doesn't have forward roundhouse is unsafe and doesn't hit low compared to.
Well, I mean,
4,
well,
huh?
it wasn't really like the technical aspect of that. It was more just like one the muscle memory and like and just like that. I mean, we've been talking about that too in terms of like the feel, right?
Yeah.
Like I had gotten used to playing sim, and then the other thing I think I've said this before is like I got spoiled playing sim. Like I never had normal. I mean, yeah, that Sand Runhurst is pretty damn good, but I was like I never had normals that hit full screen. I never had the psychological kind of warfare that I could, you know, put people in playing sim that I had before. I mean, I had fireballs playing like Ryu and stuff, but it's like, you know, I had the fireball teleport mix-ups and stuff like that that I had never done
Yeah.
before or even felt like I was capable of doing until I really started playing that character. So I think it was partly, yeah, just being spoiled with playing a character like that, and then Honda just not feeling right to me personally. Because I didn't like the one thing I really didn't like was that whole like the V skill thing. Like, because I remember you'd constantly tell me, "Oh, do this," and then V skill, yeah, and then
Yeah.
like, why do I have to do this every time? Like I don't want to have to like charge this up every time. I need to be like ready to go.
Okay, I get you. Yeah, so like that's actually a phenomenon that I find very regularly in fighting games is like I played a character in a previous version of the game and I chose that character for all the reasons that we've outlined on the show. But then the next version of the game comes out and that character's handles differently and I don't like it, so I want to pick a different character. Like that happened to me with Ibuki where I learned Ibuki in and out in Street Fighter 4 and then Street Fighter Cross Tekken came out and like everything was different and none of my muscle memory worked, and so my solution was just to not play that character despite her supposedly matching my style.
Well, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact is you don't want to confuse yourself when you do go back and play Street Fighter 4. That's a big
fair.
thing.
That's fair. I remember like that happened with 5 as well when Ibuki came out. Like I tried to play her like 4 and I got blown up for it because there's no vortex in that game. And it took me like a good year before I could like it's just a completely different character. They changed everything about her because the game engine didn't reward the same things. And then yeah, like in Cross Tekken in particular, it was like no, the model is literally ripped from Street Fighter 4.
That's
so all the
thing,
animations are the same too.
Exactly, and I was going to get to that is because the visual adds to the confusion.
Yeah,
and especially when you go to Ultra, where they're using the cross Tekken backgrounds, the further the confusion, right?
Yeah. And you're fighting poison and like none of the hitboxes.
Right, and I had that problem. I had that problem back in the day when I played Alpha 2 and Alpha 3. They look very similar, or even when we played Extrovert Street Fighter, it uses the same sprites, and there would be a little bit of confusion when we would switch between games on a game night that we're playing, you know, and I'm like, we're playing Alpha 2 for 2 hours, and we go play Alpha 3, and I'm trying to do Alpha 2 stuff. Even if I play a different character, it's just the mechanics itself, you know, it makes it tough.
Yeah, and so then it sucks because, you know, like if you're a character specialist and you're like, all right, I've put all my time into learning, Street Fighter 4 Honda or Street Fighter 4 Ibuki, and then the next version comes out, and you're like, it's like if you built a lot of identity around it, so to speak, not like in a
Mm-hmm.
weird emotional way, but just like, this is what I know. It forces you into that situation the conversation that we're having now, which is like, what do I like in a character? Who am I going to pick instead?
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting, like with 6 and with 5 too. Even like Benny, like you picked Dalsum also because you didn't have a choice, right? Like your
Yeah.
character
Well,
just wasn't in launch.
yeah, like I honestly didn't. I wasn't sure who I was gonna play. Once I knew that Honda wasn't gonna be in, but I don't know. It just took that same reveal trailer. Like once I saw that reveal trailer and what he looked like and like how like the move set that he gave him, like of all the characters, I was just like, you know what, he looks fucking cool. Like I was leaning towards like Cammy because that's who was like in the beta, right? It was like Ryu and Cammy and stuff, and I was like, yeah, Cammy's a basic enough character. I could probably just start with this until some other stuff happens, and then it was just like same reveal trailer, and then all of a sudden I was just like, that was just like right then and there. I was just like, that's gonna be the dude. Like I don't know, it was just something like just about the reveal and everything. Like it just hooked me from there. Like I didn't have any questions about it going forward after that. I was like, I'm gonna play this character.
Do you think that uh, like trailers, like, and then social media marketing and whatnot now have that impact too? Like I had that same
Mhm.
experience with Karen in Street Fighter 5. When I saw the Karen trailer, I'm like, I'm playing this fucking character, and I did all the research and broke down each like individual move, be like, oh, that's probably her stand strong, I think, you know.
Yeah.
um like Scott, like you have the best, like, I think, perspective of comparing like the media machine for gaming back then to now. Like, do you think that that impacts character selection in the same way that it impacted Benny,
Yeah,
for yourself?
absolutely. Absolutely. You see like you want that trailer, it's popping, seeing all the moves, you're like, oh my God, I want to play that character so bad.
Oh,
Just looking at the moves, you're just like, that's so sick. Like when I first saw Ken in Street Fighter 5, I'm like, man, these moves look freaking dope. And then I used them, and then I didn't like the way he felt, and I went to Laura, and I liked the way he felt. But it
specifically
was
about Ken though, like how much did the hair matter? Like the banana head too.
no, because I well, in the trailer it was harder to tell because it's not really focusing on one thing too much. Uh, it didn't matter. I liked his design and execution. It wasn't the greatest,
Sure.
but in design, I liked the design. Right, the render just wasn't that good. But I liked his movement. I liked the way he looked, and it just fit his. It fit the Ken motif. But again, I didn't like him once I picked him.
Sure.
It wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. And but yeah, a lot of times I think marketing, obviously, it's marketing, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point of it.
It seems like it carries that through line of like, I'm seeing that thing and I want to do that thing, and that's kind of why you pick a character. It's just how you see that thing has changed over the years.
That's the other thing too, is to see like, whoa, that's wildly different. That's pretty awesome. Like looking at Ken in
Oh,
Street Fighter 6. You're like, whoa, he's got a run like guy, and he's got like all these moves now. And I'm like, that's freaking cool. And he looks completely different. He looks like a hobo. Um, he's a construction worker. And I think that's cool, and that's enough to sell that character and make people play him.
I still remember the Super Street Fighter 4 trailer where they showed Dudley, Makoto, Ibuki, and then everybody else they had revealed up to that point, like Cody, Guy, and Adon,
Mm.
and like it was like a medley of all their theme songs, but all like overlaid with the same Street Fighter 4 like instrumentation. That same theme song that we all hear over again. Do 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 do.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
that and it showed like 4 rapid characters all at once. I remember being like, I want to play Makoto, I want to play Ibuki, I want to play Dudley. Like, just that trailer to me was like the legendary character promotion trailer to all standards. Nowadays it's like one character per trailer. It's pretty streamlined.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Super
And if
was
it
awesome.
Sakura's,
No, Super was awesome.
oh,
I
Super, yeah,
like how it was handled.
yeah, the promotion was on point there, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Nowadays, if it's an ArcSys trailer, though, the thing lasts for like 5 seconds, and you get to see maybe a normal.
Ah, such a tease, dude. What a tease. Giving everybody blue balls, even the women. They feel our struggle now.
So let me ask you then. Now with Street Fighter 6, like Benny, you in particular have a burden of choice right now, or a burden of options at least, with a bunch of different characters. And so I was curious about like what is on your mind when you're picking a character, both in like in a beta where it's a limited sense, when you had just those 5 or 6 characters, but then also like now we know who's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, well, for the beta, like I mean, obviously, I just naturally gravitated to Guile because of the charge character thing. But for me, it was just more kind of like a discovery thing, just to kind of see like what the how this system mechanics worked. Obviously, like I wanted to play and win, and like I was gonna see how effective Sonic Boom, Flash Kick, typical Street Fighter playing was. But then it was just like it was also just that kind of like discovery, like, oh well, how does drive rush work? How does this mechanic work? And then like because because the beta came out after they revealed like Sim and Honda. So like everybody was like they saw Sim whatever stand roundhouse and then drive rush, like that's drive rush now going in, and they're just like, oh, this is stupid, like why would you give him that or something like that. But now that I understand like the mechanics of how the game works, I'm just like, well, basically like everybody has this. It's just like you know maybe he just has it at a better range, but I don't know. Like for me, with 6, like I'm kind of leaning towards Sim first. I'm probably gonna play, I don't know, for the first time multiple characters to start, just because like one to just to kind of get a feel for which one I like best. Because like you said, I have a choice between him and Honda, but Honda has that like that V skill thing again because he does that thing where like he reaches back and like the sun comes out or whatever. So there's that thing, and then um, there's Ed. I think Ed was supposed to be at launch too, and we haven't seen anything with him yet. So I'm like,
He's gonna be Bison.
yeah. So I'm kind of like, I want to see what he looks like, and then
Maybe.
like, yeah, when things launch, I'll probably just I'll probably give them all a try, and just be like, all right, like which one feel good to like start and kind of like be the main, and then maybe have the secondary also.
Okay, that makes sense. Scott, your point about Bison makes a lot of sense in that, like, so the idea is like to make Ed like Bison, so that way people who played Bison have somebody to gravitate towards, right? And
A function.
Right. Actually, let's talk that. That's I didn't even talk about MVCI
hello
or
there.
the function. Yeah.
I don't want to see
Also,
cat butt.
my cat is all up on the stream right now.
You gotta censor that nudity, dude.
What was I gonna say? The
The
function aspect, right? And I think that's kind of where the angle that I've been taking is a lot about like analytically, like what does this character's hitboxes do? What is the top tier? What is strong and rewarded and whatnot? But all that to say, like, is there? I guess for you, Scott, is there a character in Street Fighter 6 that you gravitated towards? We know you played Jamie for a little bit, but like, what are you looking for out of the Street Fighter 6 roster?
Fun. It's just gotta be fun. Again, it's just that simple. It's gotta be fun. You gotta understand too. You know me. I'm like, I'm way past my prime days. I'm not competitive anymore. So so my choice is now deviated back to what's fun. I still want to be able to try to win. I don't want it to be too weak, but it has to be fun. And like Jamie, I felt like was one of in my personal opinion, I don't think he's not bad. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad. I felt like he was like one of the weaker characters of the 8 in the beta because everyone was just so good. But it was just fun. I like his style. I like the way he looks. He looks cool, and it's just a lot of fun. But Ken is also known because I like his total revamp. I like the way what they did with him. I like the fact that he's technically not rich anymore, and his background, right? His background
changed him up, yeah.
And I like his complete overhaul that they did with him. They just went all in with him, and I thought that was really cool, and that makes me want to gravitate towards him. But I want to see how these other characters turn out too.
Okay. Can you give me a couple examples of characters in the past that you found like fun? I guess just kind of gush about them.
Well, I mean, I had a lot of fun playing like Charlie and X vs Street Fighter when I started getting back into the Capcom games again, just because I liked the way he moved doing air flash kicks. I thought that was cool as hell. Just that was the reason why I liked him. And like the alphas, like I always liked playing Akuma because doing his VC was a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
he was and he was good. I don't know, man. They just gotta be fun.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. That speaks to me, like I want to have fun playing the game. Yeah, that is my number one priority. Even when I was competitive, that is my priority. Is he fun? That's it. That's really it.
I'm somebody that does a lot of the top tier hunting stuff lately, and
Mm-hmm.
what I've found is that because basically every season on these live service games is a new game as far as tier lists go, and finding the new top tier, oftentimes it's a giant switch or flip.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I found, or the trend that I found, is that there are sets of archetypes that are good at the top tier, and then oftentimes the characters that are bottom tier, it's less so because they suck, and more so because there's another character at the top tier that does what they do but better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they
So
makes a moot point.
right.
Yep.
And so in Street Fighter V in particular, like you could break them down into archetypes being like, okay, I have a footsies character, I have a grappler, I have a zoner character, I have a rushdown character. And like an example would be like last season, Cammy was the best, right? And there wasn't a lot of reason to play a character like what's a good example of a Cammy clone? I guess Karen. Karen was less good. I guess that's a bad example. Karen was still really fucking good.
I'll give you an example. So like another thing that with Alpha 3, because I love playing Shotos, right? And that was another reason why I picked Vyakuma, because it's like, well, I could play Ryu. He's really good. Ken, not so much. But it's like, so Ryu and Akuma are very similar, right? They share a lot of similarities. But the thing is, I don't see, outside of Ryu's Infinite, I don't see a purpose of even ever using Ryu, because Akuma does everything better. His fireball knocks down, right? It knocks down, pushes him way back, creates space, right? His DP is really good. And his Tatsu's really good. Even though Ryu's is really good as well, Akuma's is way better. It's just, it's ridiculous, right? And then he's got a dive kick on top of that. And then he has a teleport. And then his mid-screen VCs destroy Ryu's mid-screen VCs. They're just way better. He's more versatile. So he covers all the angles that Ryu does, but just does it way better.
Yeah.
So that was, I didn't think about it at first, but yeah, that was another reason why I deviate towards him more.
Okay.
And I never used Akuma before then.
It makes sense. And like Shotos, I think, are the perennial example of that, where it's like, in 5 it was like you had Kage and Nikali, they were pretty similar in function, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what was my point there? It eventually, though, if you can identify that archetype that you like doing, you end up gravitating towards just the best version of that archetype.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
And I've seen that to be like the main. And now, like that's usually my main goal in analysis, where I'm like, I know for a fact that my play style, like if a grappler ended up being top tier, or like right now in Street Fighter V, Dalsim is top tier, and I can't play that way because I have a personal limit as far as like how much I gel with that style. So like while the character has potential as this, if my style doesn't ultimately match to that potential, like there's always all this wasted potential for me playing on like wearing a shoe that doesn't fit, essentially. So like I put a lot of emphasis in trying to figure out like what exactly am I looking for in a character, so that way I can find the best version of that. And like so in my case, it's like I really like footsies into burst damage lately, and so Chun-Li gives me that option with high mobility as well. Or Ken gives me that option as well, where it's just like if I land a straight low forward, I get a third health. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Bit of a tirade there, but it seems like there's a lot of like emphasis on superseding characters when you're top tier hunting.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely true. I mean, you feel like, all right, these characters do similar things. I think it's natural to go towards the character that does it the best.
Yep. And that's different than like the top tier specialists that we were talking about earlier. Like when I brought up Abe, who has actually able to play a grappler or a dive kick character or a zoner. I've seen him play all three, and that's a completely different skill set, because we talk about top tier being like, you know, oh, you're just taking the shortcut or something. But in reality, it's like if you have the ability to, or Dan as well, Dan can do that too. If you have the ability to play all these different styles and play them all at the maximum potential, then you're in great shape.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They're gonna excel easily.
Yeah.
I know like my choices aren't gonna lend itself heavily towards winning tournaments anymore, especially now. But that's the path I choose.
Or alternatively, you find a choice that ends up being super meta, and you show the entire world that character can do that stuff.
That was the other thing too, is that sometimes I do like picking. Sometimes I like to pick the character that isn't well represented, but it still has to be a fun character. It still has to fit within my comfort zone, you know, and that, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That was one thing I enjoyed about when I played like Street Fighter 4, you know, no one was using Sakura. I was like, all right, I'll use her. And plus she didn't play anything like Alpha, which was really boring. And so it worked for me. And then Cody is just because I loved him, and like he was brand new at the time, so no one really understood him, like what he was about, and that was fun. It would allow me to forge my own identity, create strategies, you know, and that's always something that feels really good, you know, when you create the strategies yourself. There's nothing wrong with grabbing other strategies. I mean, everyone does that. It's natural, right? I do it too. But there's something to be said about picking a character and creating your identity with it.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like playing music, where, you know, you can have your own like riffs and style and your own technique, and people will go to see you for that style.
Like Jimi Hendrix. Like, all right, it feels so like that. People love to see him just because he plays the guitar backwards.
Yep. So
you know,
you play the stick backwards.
Yeah. There you go. But yeah, there's just something to be said about that. You know, I think that lends a lot to it as well. If the character's overly popular, I'm like, I kind of lose interest these days.
Yeah.
You know, that's just me. I don't expect anyone else to be like that. It's just me. You know,
no, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Benny.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm kind of the same way too. Like that's why I kind of gravitate away from like the typical like reuse and stuff like that, because I just like I look at the character and I'm just like, yeah, it doesn't matter how much damage they do or whatever, or how cool their combos look. I'm just like, everybody plays Ryu. Like I don't want to play Ryu too. So like
you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like this. Like you said, I kind of want to carve my own path, and it's just like, even if I play Ryu and I can play him at a decent level, there's gonna be somebody that's doing like so much better shit than I am, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, it's like
you want to find ways to kind of like stand out sometimes. Yeah. And to get wrong, there's nothing wrong with being that guy. I'm just gonna pick you. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just gonna pick top tier. There's nothing wrong with it, even though I may talk my trash. But you know, there's nothing wrong with it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. That's a valid choice, and it's a very good choice. You know, but it's just different for everybody else. You know, it's just not what I do anymore.
That's an archetype we haven't talked about yet, which we don't need to go too deep into it. But the protagonist guy, there's always that guy that just plays the protagonist in every.
Who's the everyman character? Who's the everyman? Who's got the basics, right?
I think Daniel Benitez, the Z-Axis gentleman, the brains behind Z-Axis. I think he plays he plays Soul. He plays Ryu. I don't know if he plays Kazuya or Jin, maybe, I don't know, but I know he always tends to play the protagonist characters, because they're always the ones who are strong too out of the gates.
Yeah.
That's the other
thing. they should be because they're representing your game, right?
Yeah,
they really should be. As simple as that. Like it blew my mind that like Ryu was so weak throughout most of Street Fighter 5. Blew my mind.
That almost seems like by design though, right? Where it's like they prove out the game system with that character, and then they add more to it, and then complexity creep basically knocks that character down tiers.
Street Fighter 4?
Implicitly. That happened in 4, didn't it? He was great at the beginning, and then just over time he just gradually started sucking when they released.
And then he got a little bit better, and then he got a little bit better in Ultra, which is basically what's happening in Street Fighter 5 now. At the end, he's a little better now.
They finally found a way to differentiate him, I guess. from the other Shotos.
But I feel like that character should never be bad. I felt like he's been disserviced a little too many times lately. He should always be at least middle road. Like ST, he's like a middle of the road character. He's not top tier, but he's also not bottom tier. He rarely has losing matches. He's just like a 5-5 character all through and through, right? He's just a very balanced character, and that's all you really need from him, right?
Yeah.
But that character should never suck.
Yeah.
Just like Chun-Li should probably never suck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought maybe picking Chun-Li might future-proof me a little bit, but then I'm finding that she plays differently in every goddamn game.
She's very drastic. Yeah, she's very drastic. She goes through drastic changes. Yeah, there's something about her. They just like to change her up. They flip her style so much. One minute she's a charge character. Next game she's not a charge character. This game she's got a fireball. This game she doesn't have a fireball. This game she's got up kicks. This one she doesn't. And then how you execute them, and then it's like, yeah, she's all over the place.
Yeah. Well,
she really is.
This is the character selection conversation. I kind of brought this up on Twitter, but like, everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's got a different reason for picking a character, and pretty much every reason is valid that I've seen.
Yeah.
We talked about today, right?
Yeah.
Like, to summarize, like the through line that I've seen is that it's ultimately I saw something cool with a character that I liked and was like attracted to visually for whatever reason, and if I see something cool, that's going to get me to keep doing that thing. And then after a while, people will learn what their styles are, and they may gravitate towards different characters based on matchups and stuff. But overall, it's about that spark of being like, I'm inspired by somebody or something playing this character, something this character can do, and I just want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every reason is valid. There's no wrong answer, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. This is a great discussion. I was honestly hoping we'd get into like the Killer Instinct and the X-Band stuff. I know that's something that we promoted, but we kind of ran out of time.
Yeah,
but that just means we'll have another time to talk to Scott because
I got stories all day about X-Band because I would say that's a pretty huge part of history.
Yeah,
not my history, but just history in the industry.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of crazy stories.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to bring you back on and talk about that. I'm personally really interested in the Killer Instinct side. It's something that I don't think I've even talked to you about on the side about that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, we'll definitely have to bring you back on.
I'm always down whenever you guys want.
And then also just for our listeners too, like as I mentioned with the character stuff, everybody has a reason, and so we'd love to hear. If you guys have a reason, feel free to reach out to us on our Twitter, leave a comment on the YouTube video, etc. Like, this is just I think this is a question we're just going to be asking every guest from here on. Why did you pick your character?
Sure, because it can lend into your personality. It does say a lot about you too. Like, all right, you like to play aggressive characters. What are you like in real life?
Yeah, no, I've got whole theories on that one too. But
and like, oh, Benny plays lame. He must be lame in real life.
It couldn't be farther from the truth.
Well, very cool. We're going to go ahead and wrap this episode up here. You can find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Spiral Series, YouTube at youtube.com/Spiral Series, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify under Absolute Guard. To all of you watching and listening, we appreciate you and that you've liked and subscribed and retweeted and checked out our Twitter at absolute_guard. And give us any feedback or any kind of comments that you might have. So thanks very much, guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, good talking to you, Scott.
Later, guys.
See ya.